Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for Osteoporosis Canada's first cook-along virtual cooking class. My name is Tracie Napoli, Director of Fund Development and MARCOM at Osteoporosis Canada, and I will be your cook-along host. Thank you to the Winnipeg Foundation and Canola Eat Well for their partnership in this cook-along series. We are also live streaming this webinar on the Osteoporosis Canada Facebook page. A big welcome to everyone watching on Facebook Live. This webinar will provide general information about cooking and food knowledge. It is not intended as individualized health or nutrition advice. If you have questions about nutrition, consult a physician or registered dietitian. Before we begin the cook-along, here's some information on nutrition for bone health. Nutrition plays an important role in overall bone health and in preventing and managing osteoporosis. In people who have healthy bones, adequate calcium intake on a daily basis is necessary to maintain bone health. Vitamin D helps to increase the absorption of calcium, ultimately building stronger bones. Fats and oils in moderation, like canola oil, aid in the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D. Protein is also essential to bone health and is necessary to build and repair bone tissue. Visit Osteoporosis Canada's website to find the amount of calcium and vitamin D you need daily, in addition to using the calcium calculator to help you calculate your calcium from the foods you eat. If you have questions about calcium or vitamin D, consult a physician. Let's begin today's cook-along with the featured recipe, stuffed meatballs with creamy polenta, which has 450 milligrams of calcium and 42 grams of protein per serving. You can find today's featured recipe and other recipes by visiting osteoporosis.ca/recipes. Today, our presenter for Cooking with Beef is Emily Richards, a professional home economist, freelance food writer, chef, and cookbook author who also enjoys culinary instruction for home cooks who want to learn more and have fun in the kitchen. She is the author and co-author of 9 cookbooks, which include topics from Italian cuisine, weeknight dinners, glycemic index diets, and comfort food. Emily writes and develops recipes for cookbooks, print and online publications and websites that include everyday cooking and healthy eating. Please welcome Emily.
Thanks, Tracie. This is awesome on a Wednesday night to be together and cooking. I think it's fabulous. And the recipe we're doing today is one of my absolute favorites. I love making meatballs. I started when I was little, making them with my grandmother and my mother, and I continue to make them with my own kids now, or sometimes I just let them do the work. So we're actually going to be cooking together. So hello, Winnipeg, and thank you for cooking along. And I hope that at the end, we'll actually get to enjoy dinner. If all goes well, which it should. We are going to start with the meatballs, and I know we have some of our ingredients all ready to go. So if you see what's in front of me, it's mise en place. So oftentimes you see all these little bowls in front of everybody. I'm a big believer of having these things ready to go. So A, you know if you're missing anything, and B, the recipe will move smoothly. So I still have to chop my garlic and parsley. So for those of you that haven't chopped your parsley and garlic, please do that because they're two main flavor components in the meatballs. Now, these meatballs have a combination of 2 meats, and I think what's great about that is I grew up using a combination of meats in my meatballs, and the reason being is it's for flavor, for texture, and it comes together really, really nicely. So there's my parsley. I just chopped it up, and then we're using 1 clove of garlic. Big clove of garlic, little clove of garlic, totally up to you. I like to have that extra kick of garlic. So I have a fairly large clove that I'm mincing up, and I tend to use my knife to mince my garlic. But if you are a garlic press lover, by all means, you can definitely use that tonight as well. So as we're going along, if anybody has questions, please feel free to ask. We will try to work together and get this all done. So if I'm moving too fast, raise your hand and let me know, because I don't want to move too quickly. All right, so garlic and parsley are chopped. Yes.
Emily, I have a question about the stems for parsley.
Yes.
Do it all?
You can use the stems, especially if they're smaller and thinner stems. I like to chop them off. They're just as flavorful. If you have some thicker parsley stems, you can actually add them to the sauce that we're using. So for those of you that have your sauce ready to go in a pot, okay, we're going to heat the sauce. And the reason why we're heating the sauce is to kind of speed up the process a little bit of cooking our meatballs. So we're using a pasta sauce, just a simple one, tomato basil, if you have a homemade one. We're using a store-bought version so that it speeds things up. It's a great pantry staple to have on hand. So if you have some of those thicker parsley stems, you can tuck those right into the sauce and they will add a little bit more flavor, which is absolutely fabulous. All right, let's get our meat involved while
Emily?
Yes.
Are we supposed to drain the liquid off of those mini bocconcini cheese things?
That's a great question. We are stuffing these meatballs tonight. So we're using fresh mozzarella, little bocconcini balls. So if there's a little bit of packing liquid in there, drain them off. And we're going to be needing 16 of those little bocconcini balls, because that's what we're stuffing our meatballs with. So yeah, definitely drain those. And you can just keep them in a little bowl. I have mine right here, set aside, ready to go, because that's what our little surprise in the meatball, which is one of my favorites, a little extra creamy. So this is my bowl of meat with our beef and our veal. And again, the beef is there, it's a hearty flavor, absolutely wonderful. And the veal has a really nice texture for meatballs, okay? We're going half and half. If you had some ground pork, you could definitely add that in here. You could also use ground chicken or ground turkey. So we really want to build up the texture of these meatballs. So by having a couple of varieties of the proteins of the ground meats, we create a really wonderful texture. I call it my nonna's mix. She used beef, veal, and pork. So it's a classic combination to produce a really nice texture and flavor for the meatballs. So we have 1.5 pounds of ground veal. So 3/4 pound of veal and 3/4 pound of beef. Now, here's the easy part. We get to just dump everything in. So that parsley and garlic that we chopped up, I'm going to add that right in. Okay, right in with our meat. And then we're also going to add some Parmesan cheese. Okay. Now, you could use other cheeses here. You could use Romano or Asiago if you wanted to. I love the flavor that it provides. It also gives it a nice little bit of a bite, especially if you're using something like a Pecorino Romano. It has a nice little bite to it. We're
Emily,
also going to add, yes.
Sorry, we have 2 packages.
Question.
One has a 1/2 cup and one is a 1/4 cup.
Great question. You're going to use a 1/4 cup right now because we want that 1/2 cup for the polenta we're making. So the 1/4 cup of Parmesan goes into our meat mixture. Thank you for asking. We're also going to add our salt. We have a 1/4 teaspoon of salt going in because we do want to have an overall wonderful flavor. And you should have an egg as well. And in the recipe, it says lightly beaten. All that means is, I'm just going to set this aside. It just means you're going to crack it into a little bowl. And with a fork, just kind of break up the yolk and the white. Okay. Now, if you don't do this part, it's not the end of the world. And we're going to add that right into our meat mixture as well. Okay. Then we're going to talk about, this is funny, but it's actually one of my favorite ingredients to talk about, fresh breadcrumbs. So you have 3/4 of a cup that is going in. And the biggest question I get asked is, Emily, you called for fresh breadcrumbs. What are fresh breadcrumbs? Fresh breadcrumbs are fresh bread made into crumbs. It can be a day old or 2 days old, but it still has some nice soft texture to it. It's got moisture in it, and that actually helps give you a nice moist meatball. So my grandmother would take any leftover bits of bread and throw it. She would use her cheese grater and break it up, or just rub it between her hands. So the breadcrumbs are a little bit larger. I use my food processor and throw them in there and pulse it up and get some really nice fine breadcrumbs. So this is what I have here. And this is a combination of sliced bread as well as some brioche that I had left over. So it's a nice fresh flavor. So those are going to go right in there as well. Okay, so you should have a nice big pile in your bowl. And this is where we're going to get our hands in. So is everyone doing okay so far? You're following along? You have your bowl of meat? All right. I'm seeing some nods, so that's good. So now we're going to get our hands in there and start mixing up the ground meat mixture. My sauce is also bubbling away here, so I'm going to turn it off. Once your sauce is heated through, you can just set it aside because we will be coming back to using it. So to mix our meat, you're going to go in there and you might want to just start pushing the meat together like this. I actually want you to kind of fold the meat in with the ingredients and break it up. Okay, I don't want you to squish it too much. I just want you to make sure that all of our ingredients are well distributed throughout. This is the fun part where you get your hands a little bit dirty. This is how you know it's homemade. All right. So I'm kind of just folding everything in. I'm keeping my fingers kind of open as I do that and breaking it apart to see, make sure that bread has gone through nicely. Now I should make a note about, I talked about the fresh breadcrumbs, but if you were making this recipe again and you don't have fresh breadcrumbs, you can use dried breadcrumbs and then just put a little bit of milk or water in it and let it sit to kind of refresh them. I always have fresh breadcrumbs in the freezer. So once you do the job of putting them through the food processor and throwing in the freezer, you will always have fresh breadcrumbs on hand. So it's a great pantry staple in the freezer. All right, so this is something that I will never forget, what my grandmother always said. You want to smell this. If it smells delicious now, raw, just imagine how awesome it's going to be when it's cooked, okay? So you want to be able to smell the cheese, the garlic, the parsley, all that fresh aroma in there that we've put in. And now we're ready to divide our meat. So this recipe it makes 6 large meatballs, 16 large meatballs. 6 would be meatloaves. So I'm not going to do anything fancy other than divide my bowl in half like that, and then in quarters. And then from each quarter, I should get roughly 4. And you don't have to be perfect at this point. You just want to break it apart so that you have 16 rough balls of ground meat mixture, okay? Don't worry about rolling them into balls right now because we do have to tuck the bocconcini in there. So we will be spending a little bit more time rolling them into beautiful meatballs. Okay. So I just have my last quarter to deal with here. Now, if you wanted to, you could make these smaller. You could also make these as regular meatballs and not stuff them. So they're just as delicious. But I do like to have that nice little nugget of cheese in there. All right, so I should have told you this ahead of time, but I'm telling you now. Your baking sheet should be ready with either parchment or foil on it, okay? The only reason being is just for easy cleanup. I love parchment paper or foil in this case because it really helps clean up the pan. So one at a time, I'm taking 1/16 of my meat, okay? And I'm just gonna flatten it a little bit in my hand, just like this. Okay, so it almost looks like a little slider. And then I'm gonna take one of my little bocconcini, tuck it in the center, and then just work that meat right around it. Okay, now if the meat feels a little bit sticky on your hands, I have a little bowl of water, or if you're near your sink, just rub it on your hands to moisten your hands, and then your rolling will happen much easier. Okay, this also adds another element of moisture to the meatballs, which I think there's nothing better than having a wonderfully moist meatball in sauce. It's one of my favorites. So we're going to just continue this process so that we fill all of our meatballs. Now, if you wanted to, if you were making this again and you couldn't find bocconcini, although I know you won't have any problem at DeLuca's doing that, you could use cubed mozzarella. Okay, so you could just cut up your regular mozzarella into 1-inch cubes, and then you can definitely go ahead and tuck those in there. Or if you want something a little bit stronger, you could tuck in a little bit of blue cheese. That would be absolutely delicious. Okay, any of your favorite cheese really would be wonderful in here. How's all our rollers doing? I see a lot of hand movements, so I know that everyone's working. You will be very happy with dinner, I promise. Do we have any questions at all from anyone? I know our cook-along guests might have their hands full right now, so they might not be able to get to their computer to ask questions, but that's quite all right. All right, so I'm just dipping my hands a little bit in that water just to kind of help keep the dough nice and moist. Okay, now I'm spreading them out so that they have a little bit of room. And I know that some ovens aren't working tonight, so I'll talk about how you're going to cook them, okay, so that they'll still be just as delicious. And you can call them a one pot or one skillet meal, the way you're doing it. The way we're doing it's a little bit different because we're putting it in the oven. And the reason why we're putting it in the oven is because we want to just cook the meatballs just through, so they're still nice and soft and tender, okay? Whereas opposed to cooking it in a skillet, you'll get a little bit more of a crust, but that is absolutely wonderful too, because it adds a wonderful bit more flavor as the caramelization happens. So for in the skillet, once all the meatballs are shaped, you're going to drizzle in a little bit of canola oil into your skillet and heat it up over, I'd start off with about a medium high heat. And you're going to put the meatballs in. I would use a nice large skillet so that it will accommodate all the meatballs. And you're going to start putting them in and browning them lightly. If you love a crust on your meatball, you can let it cook a little bit longer so that it's a little bit darker, more golden and caramelized on the outside. So that you would do a medium high heat, which would be really good. Okay. But when you're doing them in the skillet, you definitely can't walk away from them. Okay. Whereas in the oven, I can get a few other things organized. So you do have to be a little bit more attentive. I hope everyone's rolling away. I have 5 more to go. And they are almost even. If I was doing meatballs that were not stuffed, I typically end up using my ice cream scoop, which I also use for cookies. So they're very handy to get even sized meatballs. So you could do that as well. But in our case, we're definitely having some nice large meatballs. Got a couple more here. And I think I'm going to shift them on my pan a little bit because I'm a little too close. There we go.
Emily,
Yes.
I have a question. So in doing it in the skillet, do I need to like do a thermometer test for doneness? Or can you give me a couple tips on how do I know when they're done?
For sure. So this is a 2-part meatball recipe. And by 2-part, it's basically 2 methods of cooking. In the oven, it's going to start off in the oven to cook through. In the skillet, the first part, you're browning them, but you're not actually cooking them through. They're going to be in the skillet a little bit longer. So we won't be testing them for doneness until the second part, which is when we add the sauce. Okay. So, and these are a little bit trickier to test with a thermometer because of that little nugget of cheese right in the center. So typically you would insert a thermometer into the center of a meatball, look for 165, and you know that they're done. These have a little nugget of goodness in there, so it's a little bit different. And in fact, because it's just coating the outside of the cheese, they'll cook a little bit quicker because it's not as thick as going right through the meatball, okay? So I will actually do 2 styles for you so that you can see both, I'm just gonna give my hands a wash, okay? And once you wash your hands, you should be good to continue on with everything else. I don't think we have to get too dirty for anything else. And I'm gonna move the sauce off my burner so that I can show you how to brown some of the meatballs as well, okay? So that we can do both cooking methods, because it's only fair. Not all of you can do it in the oven. Some of you have to use a skillet, so I should be able to show you both, okay? So here's my sauce that's warm. I'm just gonna set that aside. I'm just gonna use a smaller skillet because I'm gonna do most of them in the oven, okay? I am gonna keep some out. Let's do 4. I'll keep 4 of these out. And I'm gonna put the rest in the oven. And I'm gonna put my timer on because if I don't, I will forget. So your oven's at 350. Okay. And we're gonna check it in about 10 or 12 minutes. I'm gonna put my timer on for 10. And remember, it's not gonna be cooked through at this point. What we're doing is we're setting the meat, we're setting the meatballs. And for those of us that are doing it on a skillet, we're gonna add, you don't need much, just a little bit of canola oil. Canola oil is perfect for this because it's neutral. We'll still benefit from all the flavor of the meat as well as the sauce, okay? So medium heat, just gonna make sure that that's all right. And I'm gonna get a pair of tongs because you do wanna move these around so that you can brown them as best you can, okay? So I left myself plenty of room here with these 4 meatballs. So this is good because you have to pay attention to this now. You can't walk away. All right. So you all look like you should have a glass of wine. You should be relaxing, right? The meatballs are in the oven. It's all good. It'll start smelling even better shortly. All right. So I'm gonna wait till these start to fry up a little bit, and then I'm gonna show you what they look like in the pan. But we're gonna get a few other things organized before we start the polenta, okay? So you will need, those of you that are going into the oven with your meatballs, you're gonna need a casserole dish. This is about 11 by 7, which I find fits the meatballs quite nicely. If you have something larger, that's okay too, because we're gonna be putting half of the sauce on the bottom. We're gonna add our meatballs and then pour the rest of the sauce on top. So I'm gonna put my sauce on this side. So that's ready to go. And I'm gonna turn my meatballs here. Now, of course, these might not be as perfectly circles, perfect spheres as the ones in the oven, but they will still be beautiful. Let's talk polenta. Just from a show of hands, how many of you have had polenta before? Most of you have. That's awesome. How many of you have made polenta? Is that where the, yeah. Sometimes it's a hit or miss. I totally get it. I love polenta. I grew up eating polenta. We called it farinata. So in translation, farina. But it was basically served up. My grandmother would make it with sauce, a meat sauce. She'd put sausage in it, and that was kind of ladled up in a bowl, very similar to porridge. And we would just eat it, and it was so filling and hearty. We absolutely loved it. So we're taking a spin on that and creating this polenta just with some cheese. But more importantly, we're getting a really rich, creamy texture from the milk that we're adding. So our bonus with this recipe, I'm sure you all saw, 450 milligrams of calcium per serving, blows my mind. It's awesome. Not only that, it's absolutely delicious. We're using milk to create flavor and this wonderful texture, okay? So I'm using 2% milk. You could use 1% milk if you have that at home, or skim. Whole milk will give you an even creamier texture. We are gonna balance it off with water, just because I find that when I use all milk, I tend to scorch it. So I have that little bit of water in there. So we're using 3 cups of milk and 1 cup of water. if you wanted to, you could add a little bit more flavor and use 1 cup of broth instead of water. And then I would just reduce the salt, okay? One of the reasons why we do have the salt in the polenta is because we aren't using broth. See that nice little bit of smokiness from my pan, because soon I'll get to show you the caramelization on my meatballs, okay? So for the polenta, it's only 4 cups of liquid, but that doesn't mean that I want you to use a small pot to make it in. I want you to use something a little bit taller, that the liquid will only be about halfway up the side of the pan, okay? So it would only come about up to here. Reason being is as it starts to bubble and cook, we are gonna turn the heat down, but it can get quite volcanic and bubble up. So it's better to have it halfway down, okay? And then I also got my longest wooden spoon to work with. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is add my milk into my pot and my water. Okay, and then we're gonna add our salt as well. No, we're gonna add our salt with the cornmeal, but first I wanna show you the meatballs. So here's stage 1 of our meatballs. I'm bringing it down here to my other camera so that you can see a little bit closer. The crust on there, okay? So basically, once you have about 3, almost 4 sides of these meatballs cooked, okay, browned, because again, they're not cooked fully, what you're gonna do is take your sauce and add it right to the skillet. And then this is gonna go back on your heat. I'm just gonna put it back here. Now, the one thing that's a little bit different, I'm gonna put my milk and water on my burner so that I can start it simmering. The one thing with the skillet meatballs that I wanna point out is that we should cover them a little bit and then uncover them. So in the oven, when we put the meatballs in, it kind of is sealed, okay? But they won't cook quite the same on the skillet. So we'll be covering them in the skillet for about 5 minutes and then uncovering them because we want all the liquid from the meatballs themselves, as well as the sauce, to evaporate a little bit so that we can condense the flavor, okay? So I'm gonna take, so I used some of my sauce for those meatballs, but I'm gonna take half of my sauce and just spread it into my casserole dish for those meatballs that are coming out of the oven. Okay, I'm just gonna move it around there so it has a nice little base. Okay, and I got sauce everywhere. I'm just gonna wipe that up a little bit. All right, now back to the polenta. What is polenta? I always describe it as the mashed potato or the corn version of mashed potatoes because it has that nice creamy texture. It's nice and smooth, and it is a pantry staple, much like potatoes. But if you get bored of mashed potatoes, polenta is a nice option for you. So I always have polenta, which is cornmeal, in my pantry. Now you can actually buy a version that's called polenta, and it comes in bags and it'll say polenta on it. Sometimes it'll say polenta express, but in the end, it's always cornmeal. There's different textures of cornmeal. So it could be fine cornmeal, it could be coarse, it could be medium. Typically some of the smaller grain mills that mill the corn leave it larger, which basically means that it needs to cook for a lot longer. If you use fine cornmeal or medium coarseness, it usually takes anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to cook. So it can actually be a great side dish as an option during the week, okay? The one thing you don't want to use is corn flour because that is completely milled, it's a powder, and it doesn't create that same wonderful texture that the polenta, the cornmeal would, okay? So I love having it. I add it to biscuits when I'm baking. It's wonderful in bread just to give it a nice little bit of texture. So I always have it on hand. And if you have trouble finding it in the grocery store, typically it can be in the international aisle, but more and more I'm seeing it in the baking aisle. Usually semolina is there too. So not that you would use semolina for this, but they're very similar in color. So you do want to make sure you read the label. Okay. How are we doing? How's everybody doing? We're doing okay. I'm going to check on you. I see nods. I see thumbs up. This is great. I love it. Who thought dinner was going to be this easy, right? I guess the truth in the fact that when you taste it, that's how we'll know it was easy and delicious. Now, the one thing with this pot of milk and water on the stove, as we all know, because it's probably all happened to all of us, if you walk away from it, it will bubble over. So we definitely don't want to walk away from it. Now, the bonus being, if you're doing it on your stove, if your meatballs are on the stove and your polenta's on the stove, you're going to see them both side by side, and there's not a chance of that happening. So the typical measurement to make polenta that I like to use is 4 to 1. So 4 cups of liquid. So in our case, 3 cups of milk, 1 cup of water to 1 cup of the cornmeal. Okay. And we're going to add our salt at the same time. So I have my salt there, and I have a whisk ready to go. Oh, there's my timer. I'm going to check the meatballs. Make sure see how they're doing. They are good to go. I'm going to put them in front of this camera here so you guys can see what they look like. Okay, so they're set. If I touch them, they're not going to go anywhere. They have just a little bit of golden brown color, and the liquid that you see coming out of it is just that little bit of water evaporating from the ground meat. If I cook them any longer, you'd start to see the cheese coming out. We definitely don't want that yet. We want to see that happen in the sauce. Okay. Now, I've also been asked about this recipe. Why am I cooking it in a baking sheet and not cooking it in my casserole dish first? This is the reason, what I just showed you. That little bit of liquid, sometimes it could be a little bit of fat that's cooking out. So by cooking it separately first and then adding it, you get a nice, brighter, cleaner flavor of the meatball. And you can do the same thing in the skillet. If you find that you're getting a lot of liquid or fat off the meat from the meatballs, you can just take them out of the skillet, give it a wipe, and then put them back in with the sauce. Okay, it's a great way to just kind of reveal the true flavor of the meatball. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is transfer my meatballs into my casserole dish, and they'll be fit in hopefully nice and snug. Okay, I'm using my tongs. I definitely don't want to be, you could use a spoon if you feel that they're going to fall apart. They shouldn't, but if you were very gentle rolling them, they might not have been squeezed together too much. I can start to see some of the cheese peeking out, and that's wonderful because as the cheese oozes out a little bit, well, you'll see it when I take them out again, but what that means is that it also goes into the sauce and it thickens up a little bit. It's absolutely fabulous. I love it. I'm going to just put my baking sheet back here.
Emily, I have a question. So should I have been a little more firm with rolling my meatballs so that they would have stuck together? Was I being too gentle?
You were too gentle. It happens to all of us. So, and you were doing them in a skillet as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the skillet, that also will have, having that compact, and I apologize because I should have mentioned that, having them a little bit more compact. So how are they? Are they, can you bring them closer to the camera, Ellen, so I can see what they look like?
They look good, Emily, but I was just wondering, maybe I should have been, like, should I have rolled them a little bit more?
In the skillet, so you notice that when I transferred them from the baking sheet, they tend to set all the way around. In the skillet, because they're round, you can't get that kind of browning that happens all the way around, so they might be a little bit softer. So the bonus being is you don't have to transfer them again. You can just leave them in the skillet when you add the sauce. So that will help firm them up all around, which should be helpful.
Thank you.
And if not, I'm going to let everybody know this now. should they fall apart, all you have to do is kind of mash them up in the sauce. It makes an awesome meat sauce with
That's a
added
good
cheese.
tip.
It's absolutely delicious. All right, so I'm going to just grab a spoon. You don't have to. You can just pour it right over top your meatballs, but I'm gonna just make sure that all the meatballs have some sauce right over top. Okay, and then I haven't changed the temperature of the oven. It's still the same. And it's gonna go right back into the oven. Now, I'm gonna give you some other little ways to not only bump up the calcium, but also to bump up the flavor for this in another step that doesn't even exist in the recipe. It's just between you and us. You and us, me and you, us and me. Okay, back into the oven. All right, so now this is gonna stay in here a little bit longer. Okay, and I'm just going to check these meatballs on the stove here. I just need to put a lid on them because I had them on fairly low heat. You know, we all have that cupboard with the lids all piled in. That was mine. There we go. All right. I hope your milk was simmering and I hope you didn't walk away from it. But now it's time to add our polenta. I had turned mine off accidentally because I saw it simmering a little too high. So gently, in a bit of a stream, I'm shaking my polenta, my cornmeal in, and whisking it in. Okay, and I'm gonna add my salt. I'm gonna whisk in my salt as well. So at first glance, when you see this, it's going to look quite liquidy, which is okay because it will take some time to thicken. We don't want this to be very, very thick and sticky. We want this to be smooth and thick, but still spoonable, okay? So once you have the cornmeal in there, and you should start to feel it thickening as you're whisking, okay? And depending on your heat, you may start to see some bubbles popping up, okay? And mine are popping up a little too much right out of the pot. So that just means that my heat is a little too high. And once that happens, I'm going to switch over to my large wooden spoon. And by large, I mean long, okay? So that I can stir it. And I'm actually going to move this pot over to my other camera to show you what this looks like. Okay, so this is only a few minutes in, but it's already smooth and thick and very creamy. Okay, but we do need to cook this a little bit longer. Oftentimes people see this and they're like, oh, it's thick, I'm done. Technically, you're done, but you want to actually cook it so that the polenta is smooth. I know it looks smooth right now, but if you actually put some, and don't because it's really hot, if you rubbed it between your fingers, you'd actually feel a little bit of the cornmeal grain in it. So we want to cook it so that you don't feel quite as much grittiness in it. You want it to be a nice smooth texture in your mouth, okay? So it has a really nice mouthfeel to it. All right, so this process becomes very easy because you're just going to stir every now and again, and it will get thicker. So you may need to adjust your heat. You don't want to do this over too high of a heat. You also don't want to lose your heat. There we go. Oh, I keep losing it. And there we go. Nice and low. All right. And we're going to be adding cheese to this polenta. My burner keeps going out because it's so low. Camp stoves are so silly sometimes. They like to be high or off. There we go. All right. So we're going to be putting cheese into our polenta, but you can add some herbs to it as well. So I don't know, did everybody use all of their parsley already, or do you have a little bit left? Nobody has any left? No parsley? Okay. Well, if you had extra parsley, oh, somebody has some parsley. So if you have some parsley left, you could add it to your polenta, right? We don't want to waste anything. So use up that parsley in there. And the half a cup of Parmesan cheese that you have packed separately is for our polenta, which is what I have here, okay? And we're gonna add that kind of closer to the end. I do have a little bit more parsley in my fridge. So I think I will chop just a little bit so that it has a little bit of green, but this could be basil, or if you had some oregano, it would be lovely to add. Okay, I'm just gonna add a few leaves. I'm gonna set aside my stems. I actually freeze a lot of my stems for parsley, and I use them in soup stocks or when I'm making tomato sauce, and I like to add them for flavor. Okay, so just chop this up a little bit. And you'll notice that I'm not continually stirring this pot of polenta, okay? You don't have to be on it. I know oftentimes when people think of risotto, they think the same thing, that they have to be stirring constantly. You only have to stir it constantly if you want somebody else to stir it and stay out of your way, just as an aside, okay? That's the side note, that's the tip of the evening. Make risotto, give it to somebody else so that they stay out of your way in the kitchen. I'm going to add my parsley now. You could also add garlic to this if you wanted to have a nice little bit of garlic flavor and mimic the garlic that we have in the meatballs, which is really nice. Okay, I'm going to stir that. Now, we use Parmesan in our meatballs and the polenta. I tend to like to, when I'm serving two things together, use the same herbs or something similar so that they go really well together. In the case of this dish, I also like the texture of it because it's very creamy and comforting. It's something that it's like a braised beef and mashed potatoes, kind of that nice tender, you're breaking into it. And oftentimes we think of meat, let's say beef or veal, as veal chops or steaks and things like that. And we don't always think about ground beef or ground veal in that way, but they are so tender and so wonderful as a dish. It's wonderful to change it up a bit. So you don't always have to go to a steak, but this is an elegant dish, a little different obviously than a steak, but the texture of it is really, really nice. You can kind of, and you'll see when we kind of break into the meatball and scoop up the polenta, how wonderful it truly is, okay? So I'm going to want to take a peek at your polenta here. I'm going to come over and see if I can see some polenta and how everybody's doing. How's it? Oh, that's a nice pot of polenta. I love it. Has anyone's meatballs come out of the oven yet? Oh, everybody's polenta looks, okay, all of your polenta looks way better than mine. But this is what it should look like. You should have a nice kind of spoonful. I'm going to get closer here and hopefully not make a mess. A nice big spoonful of polenta. Okay, so it should be fairly thick that it sits on the spoon. If it's still running down off the spoon a little bit, that's okay. This is when you want to add your Parmesan cheese. Okay, so that half a cup of Parmesan goes in. And I talked about how the herbs mimic each other in the polenta and the meatballs. So does the cheese. So if you were using a different cheese in the meatball, all the different cheeses we talked about, you could definitely use a different cheese in the polenta. I love Gorgonzola cheese in my polenta. Offers up a really nice flavor. It's also absolutely delicious with cheddar cheese, okay? So you can really, it's a great place to use up those bits of cheese that you might have in the fridge. I'm sure we've all been there. We've had cheese tray out. Somebody didn't like a few of the different cheeses. This is a great place to take all that cheese and throw it in there. It'll add wonderful flavor to it. And it depending on the cheese itself, it might be a little bit stringy as well. So that's always fun when you pull it out of the pot, okay? So if your polenta needs to sit for a little bit, because as soon as it sits, it does start to thicken and firm up. You can actually heat it while it's still warm over low heat and add a little bit more milk or water to it and thin it out, okay? Once it's completely firm though, once it's cold, it's very hard, not hard, very hard, but it's firm. So you actually would have to cut it and fry it or bake it or grill it. And any way with meatballs, I'm happy to enjoy, okay? You can also, if you needed to wait to serve this for a little bit, you could actually put your pot into some hot water and just keep it warm that way. Because oftentimes the dry heat of the burner, whether it's electric or gas or induction, it just kind of cooks the bottom and it gets thick and crusty at the bottom. So by putting it in a pot of hot water or a big bowl of hot water in your sink, it'll stay warm and smooth, okay? I hope everyone realizes that they're getting some good upper arm workouts today by rolling meatballs and stirring polenta. So if you didn't go to the gym, that's okay. You went tonight. Now I hear my meatballs bubbling away in the skillet. I should probably check on them because they're making quite a bubbly mess over here. They smell really good. Ooh, there's some cheese oozing out. That's always delicious. I'm going to grab a spoon here and give them a stir. So even just by poking them with the spoon, I can feel that they're much firmer than when I started. So there's a couple things that you can do. You can cut into one and the cheese will all ooze out and make sure it's cooked. But you can really tell just by giving them a tap. So because we rolled them, we know how squishy they were. And in fact, they may have fallen apart because they're so squishy, but now they've firmed up nicely. And I know that they're good to go. So I'm actually gonna serve up some of these and then I'm gonna pull out the ones from the oven. Let's see, what kind of, I'm gonna use a plate. I'm gonna use a plate and serve up some polenta. So you can, and then I'll show you 2 plates here. So I'm gonna just smooth this out like so. And then I'm gonna put a couple of these meatballs. I'll put 3 on. I'll leave 1 in the pan. Put some extra cheesy sauce on there. Okay, there's 1. I'll put it in front of this camera and then I'll move it to the other one. But I told you that another way to get a little bit more calcium and flavor in there, we already have lots of cheese. We use the milk and the polenta, but I happen to have some shredded mozzarella. So why not make these meatballs parmigiana? And you can sprinkle a little bit more mozzarella on here, okay? So this will melt a little bit with the warmth of the meatballs, or you could just reach into the oven and sprinkle them with some mozzarella cheese and pop them back in so that it melts over top. The reason why I'm telling you this is because these meatballs left over are delicious in a sandwich. So you could have a meatball parmigiana sandwich. I would cook up a little bit rapini on the side and tuck it in there too, because that's one of my favorite vegetables. I just fry it up in some canola oil with garlic and hot peppers, tuck it in there with the meatball and have a wonderful sandwich. So there's one of our plates. Is anyone serving up their meatballs yet? I don't want to miss that. Oh, what kind of cheese is that? Oh, okay. You're going to put some more Parmesan. That would be great. Yeah, definitely. I would use that. And in fact, I actually have a little chunk of fresh Parmesan that I will put on my second plate with the ones from the oven because they're just about done as well. And again, we're going to look for how firm the meatballs are when they come out of the oven and also the aroma. And they will look a little bit different because the ones in the skillet get that, again, that brown caramelization happening on the outside, that nice crust, where in the oven, it's just going to be a slightly softer more even colored meatball. Okay.
Emily,
I think, yes.
how long do they stay in the oven the second time?
Oh, about 15 minutes.
Okay, now I had a smaller casserole, so I had to do a double layer,
Oh, okay.
but it was
So,
all covered with sauce. Do you think that's
okay.
okay?
That's totally okay. I would leave them in just for maybe a couple minutes more because of the thickness of having a double layer.
Right.
So, but they shouldn't need much longer than about 15 to 18 minutes. I don't think you have to let them cook too much longer after that.
Okay.
Perfect. I'm gonna, I heard the start of my timer go off. So I'm gonna reach in here. And what you're looking for with your, I'll put them over here, with your meatballs from the oven is your sauce to be bubbly. That's what they look like there. You can see the sauce is kind of bubbling all around the steam. And again, you're going to give them a poke. Okay, see how firm they are. And if you're worried, by all means, I'm always a big believer of you can take a little paring knife or you can take a fork. I'll get both. I'll turn my timer off. And just cut right into it because this is dinner. So I want to make sure that I can eat it. Okay, so as I cut into it, what you're looking for is the meat to be no longer pink. Okay, so if I pull this up here and I can show you, I know it'll be covered in sauce, but you can see that the meat's no longer pink there. And I still have, if I can flip this over, that lovely little nugget of cheese that's nice and oozy. Okay, oops, it fell right in. I should probably taste it and let you know if it's any good. If it's not good at your house, what's going to happen? Who's going to eat it? I hope that you have family that will enjoy this tonight. I know my family will. Meatballs, one of their favorite dinners. Mm.
Emily, thank you. Look at how delicious it is.
Oh, do you have yours done already? I'm so
seeing-
excited to see it. You're eating already.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And did it work out okay on the stove for you?
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful.
Awesome.
And this is my bowl I made.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
That's a beautiful bowl. It's perfect. And you know what? You're eating ahead of us because you did it on your stove top.
Yeah, it was super fast, like super fast.
They do cook quicker on the stove top. So I'm gonna scoop up some of these oven ones too.
I want to say thank you to DeLuca's because the food is absolutely beautiful. Like they did a really great job of getting everything ready. So I wanted to say thank you to DeLuca's.
Yeah,
Yes, for
they
sure,
were terrific.
definitely. I got the opportunity to teach at DeLuca's last time I was in Winnipeg, and I felt like I was there with my family. My family is Southern Italian, and I didn't want to leave that store. And in fact, I think some may say that I left with too many groceries that I shouldn't have, but I appreciate good Italian food.
Well, they did a great job. Great job.
These are, well, and then you did the cooking, so that's a good combination. So these are the oven meatballs that I just served up, and I'm gonna, instead of doing the mozzarella, I'm gonna just do some fresh Parmesan on there, okay? But again, this could be Asiago, it could be a little bit of Romano, whatever cheese you have. And then, because I still have my parsley out, I can make it look fancy. Does anybody make dinner fancy for their family? I'll use this nice big leaf on there. I still have parsley from my garden, so I'm using it up. There we go. Decorate them both. So, dinner served. How's it going with everybody at home? Is dinner almost served? We have somebody serving and eating, so that's good.
I checked and my meatballs still need to cook a little longer.
Yeah,
That's
mine do
okay.
too. Yeah.
They are big meatballs, and everybody's oven is a little bit different, and it's also the vessel that you put it in. So whether they're packed in, take a little bit longer. If it's a large casserole dish, they tend to cook a little bit quicker and the sauce will evaporate more. So you'll end up not with almost a drier sauce as opposed to a more liquidy sauce. And then, yes.
They said in the recipe to cover the casserole dish.
Yes, you can cover it, and then that will help cook things a little bit faster as well because they're steaming at the same time. I left mine uncovered so that I wouldn't have to deal with the noise of foil. That was the only purpose. But if you have a casserole dish with a glass lid, that would be a perfect thing to do and to use it. Are there any other questions?
Well, this was great. Thanks very much, Emily.
Oh, you're welcome.
Can't wait to eat.
Can't wait till next week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. You guys all look great in your aprons too.
Thank you very much. Almost ready.
Hi, everyone. It's Tracie. Yes, you did. This looks delicious, and you all did such an amazing job. And I do love seeing you all in your purple Osteoporosis Canada aprons. I just want to also say that, yes, you can get more information and how to use the Calculate Your Calcium tool on the Osteoporosis Canada website. And you can also get today's recipe by visiting osteoporosis.ca/recipes. And you can get the recorded version of this webinar on the OC replay webpage, which will be available in the next 48 hours. So if you want to watch it again, you can definitely check it out. And of course, we have to thank our amazing partners who helped make this happen, the Winnipeg Foundation and Canola Eat Well, and also, of course, Emily Richards for an amazing cook-along class, and DeLucas for the grocery delivery. Now, there are 3 more cook-alongs that are happening, and they're all going to start in November, the next 3. We've got feta and kale stuffed mushrooms. It's a vegetarian recipe. That's next Wednesday. On November 11th, we're going to have the General Tao pork and noodles, and then a chicken cassoulet on November 18th. And if you live in Winnipeg, you can register for the virtual cooking classes. But if you don't live in Winnipeg and you still want to learn about the recipes and other techniques and strategies for cooking to get calcium and protein, you can watch us on Facebook as we stream live on each of these days, and follow Osteoporosis Canada for notices and updates. And lastly, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you so much to our great group of participants, and to everyone watching on Facebook Live. Be sure to stay connected by following us and signing up for our e-newsletters, and we look forward to cooking with you again. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.